Welcome into another episode of Betting the Pitch, MLB edition, with your host, _G Warner, on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. This will be an episode for Friday, Major League Baseball. I'm recording this Friday afternoon. A lot has gone on in the whole season. We're about to wrap it up, but still a bunch of races still in play. I figured it'd be worth it to go a little bit deeper on Friday's card and put it out there with a few hours for everyone to listen to it. If you're not a member of my Patreon or you're not a patron yet, check out patreon.com/real_G Warner. Best place to get direct access to me. All my plays coming out across the various sports I'm handicapping at this point. And also, if you download the application, turn on notifications, you can get a buzz every time I lock in a play, add a write-up, or give some important information that could be useful in placing bets yourself. So check that out, patreon.com/real_G Warner. All lines quoted in this podcast are courtesy of betonline.ag. My favorite place to get my bets down early. Reduced use is offered on almost every game you want to bet, right up until game time. Please follow the link found in the podcast description to fund your account and use the promo code GW50. You got to use GW50 and you get a 50% match bonus up to $1,000. So now we have some more money in our accounts. Let's go straight to it for the Major League Baseball calendar on this Friday, September 29th. I'll go in rotation order and try to give an idea of what the heck is on the line for some of these games, because there's not a lot for some, but there's also plenty for others. I think the most relevant right now is probably the wild card, and we'll start with Miami visiting Pittsburgh. But Edward Cabrera on the mound for the Marlins visiting Pittsburgh. It looks like it's going to be Andre Jackson, I think, starting. Also this time of year, good luck trying to figure out who's going to be in what position. But Miami currently in the last wild card spot at this point, half a game up on the Cubs, 1.5 on Cincinnati, and the Padres are making a run to 3.5 back, but I don't think they can make that up with only 3 games left to go. So Miami's got to win this one if they want to play in the playoffs, but you could say that about a lot of these teams. Currently, Cabrera is a slight -118 favorite, which is a little bit surprising to me. On the road, figured he'd be a lot more expensive, and I wonder what that says about this number. Over-under is 8.5, juice split both ways. We will have a best bet coming end of show, so stick around for that, by the way. Cabrera's been really good. Strikeout numbers have been great. One of the many really great arms in the Miami organization. I'm not necessarily sure what to expect from him in terms of pitch count and things of that nature. But if you got to think Miami's this close to the playoffs, they'll probably use him a little bit more than they have. Feels like a really short price to me. I lean to Miami on the road, but I'm not really a favorite player, you could say, or especially not a road favorite player. So that's probably something that I will not be looking at much closer unless we get a move there. Next, go to Philadelphia at the New York Mets, and that looks like that was postponed due to weather, I assume. Philly has already clinched the wild card, so in the number 1 seed, so they're in pretty good shape. But I guess if it's postponed, there's no reason to talk about it. Go Washington next at Atlanta. Trevor Williams at Austin Winans. I think it's Austin, one of the a call up for the Braves this year, who has had some really good starts, some really bad ones. So hard to know what's going to really be expected of him. When I look at the division leaders, it looks like the Braves are 5 games up in the Dodgers, so they have nothing to play for, but are gigantic favorites. -285 right now at BetOnline. Over-under is 10.5, juiced to the under a little bit. Trevor Williams for the Nats has had a pretty good season, I think, considering what he has at his disposal in terms of stuff and things of that nature. His stuff is not great. He pitches to contact a lot. I'm really curious and doing this before lineups come out, hard to know what the Braves are going to throw out there. They want to keep everyone as in form as possible for the playoffs coming up, especially they're going to have a few days off with the wild card coming up, but I can't imagine they want to risk anyone due to injury at this point. Even close, if you're banged up, probably get a day off. Might see some players coming out early, which might make the pesky Washington Nationals a little bit cheaper. Or make honestly give them some value potentially in that 2.5 to 1 odds to win this matchup. I think I'd probably lean more towards over, not being sure what we'll get from Winans, expecting Atlanta to put a pretty good lineup out there. And then if they get to Trevor Williams early, maybe switching some players out as we get closer to, I guess, the later innings. And so over 10.5 is probably my lean in that one. Next, we'll go to Chicago. The Cubs visiting Milwaukee. Kyle Hendricks at Colin Ray. Milwaukee's already clinched the division. The Cubs, a game a half game out, excuse me, of the wild card. So big deal for the Cubs, especially after collapsing and giving up some games with bad defense late just this week. I think from just my perspective about the Cubs, they're a good enough team to be in the playoffs, but those little things are big mistakes and they've cost them pretty significantly. So Kyle Hendricks currently a plus 100, so even underdog on the road over under 8.5, juiced a little bit to the under. Colin Ray has been, I think, way better than expected this year for Milwaukee. They know how to pitch. That's something that organization does very well. But he's been pretty problematic over his Major League Baseball career. Was pretty weak as a starter for the Padres, I want to say, way back when, and then came to the Milwaukee organization, and things have improved, I think. How much have they improved? I guess that's the question necessarily. But from my current perspective, I don't really think that the Brewers are a side I want to back here. They're actually one I'd like to go against because they have really nothing to play for and are essentially just trying their best to stay as healthy as possible. And that's a problem for this time of year, especially with the Cubs who are playing for something. Kyle Hendricks is not a pretty pitcher, doesn't have the high velocity, doesn't have high strikeout rates, but he's done it enough in his career ever since he kind of got over this 2-year stretch of really struggling. He's been good this year, has had a really good, I think, past history of being able to miss bats or at least get a lot of soft contact. So I think I'm looking pretty closely at the Cubs here at even money, and don't really know where this one will go. I expect maybe that you'd probably see, based on the motivation angle, that there's probably some more money on the Cubs coming in than there would be on the Brewers, especially considering that crowd should be very Chicago friendly, as it routinely is filled with, I think, almost more Cubs fans than Milwaukee fans. Of course, big fan base. And it's only an hour and a half from Milwaukee drive, I believe. So that's pretty good, I think, for a Cubs potential here. We'll end up seeing, of course, what happens, but that's certainly my lean for now. I guess we'll see what that ends up looking like as we get towards game time. And I think I'll probably wait to see lineups, though I could potentially see myself speculating. If you're a patron member, you'll be able to, or if you're a patron, you'd get that information. But it's certainly something that I'd be very interested in potentially grabbing, maybe even sooner rather than later, just to make sure you get even money or better if you're offered that at your book. Moving next to Cincinnati, visiting St. Louis. Brandon Williamson at Jake Woodford. Currently Williamson a minus 114 favorite on the road. Over under is 9, juiced pretty heavily or all the way to the over. Might see 9.5, but it probably sticks here. And so when you look at the wildcard game backs category, Cincinnati's a game and a half back Miami. So they'll be very interested in their, I guess, NL Central brethren, both Pittsburgh and Milwaukee, potentially trying to play spoiler a little bit for the two teams that are above Cincinnati in the wildcard race. But Cincinnati probably has to win out. They probably know that. So I would expect them to be very aggressive with going to the bullpen. They were with Andrew Abbott a couple of nights ago, and I would expect that same sort of thing with Williamson, who's been able to miss bats, but ultimately, or at least a little bit better than I think he had early in his career, but still is a concern, especially with the St. Louis power. Big question of what the St. Louis lineup is going to look like, that's for sure. But for now, I do feel like St. Louis, I mean, going into the season, we're certainly power rated better than Cincinnati. It has not gone well for them this season. They traded away a lot of pitchers and a lot of pieces, but ultimately kept a lot. I think I'm more interested in St. Louis here with a potential to play spoiler, because Cincinnati has all the pressure in the world right now. St. Louis knows they're not playing 3 days from now. So that's the side I'd want. It's probably not the sexiest side, or it doesn't make you feel the most comfortable, considering they don't have the motivation to really go all out here. But I think most Major League Baseball players are worried about their stats and trying to get their next contract. And probably Oli Marmol, the St. Louis manager, is also in a position trying to keep his job, which we'll see what happens there. But St. Louis plus 104 looks a little bit interesting to me right now. Last but not least, in the National League, we got the Dodgers visiting San Francisco. Lance Lynn at Keaton Wynn, I want to say, rhyme matchup there. San Francisco eliminated from the playoff contention. So, and the Dodgers don't have anything to play for because they won't catch the Braves for the 1 seed. So not a lot to play for here. Currently, Lance Lynn on the road to -135 favorite. Over under is 8.5. Juice split both ways. Lynn has real home run problems that could be an issue really anywhere in the major leagues, especially not especially in San Francisco because it's such a hard park to hit home runs in. So that probably worries me a little bit less. I feel like it's a good park for him, though. If he can't succeed at San Francisco, then I think Lanston was already on my list as a potential to fade as a big favorite in the playoffs, but a bad start to here might only push that a little bit further. Hard to know. San Francisco plays really well at home. This is a big rivalry out west, but really hard to know about motivation for this one. And it's hard to really handicap. 8.5 feels like a reasonable total, kind of high for San Francisco in their ballpark, but based on the home run prone Lance Lynn and then win against a Dodgers lineup that's probably the same sort of story with Atlanta, trying to play and stay as fresh and as into it as possible because they know they're going to have a bunch of days off coming up. I think I'll wait to see what happens with this one. But ultimately, I guess I like the home dog plus 124 and that over 8.5. Moving now to the American League, we have Cleveland at Detroit, Cal Quantrill at, I think it's Jacob Wentz from Detroit. Currently, Quantrill -108 favorite on the road, over under 8.5, juice slightly to the over. Cal Quantrill has been pretty good since he came back from the IL, but it's all smoke and mirrors. It feels to me. It doesn't strike out many people, and that's a big issue. Cleveland eliminated, but we kind of got the going away party for Tito Francona, their manager, coming up. Last 3 games, I think, for him and his probably Major League Baseball career. Awesome for Tito. Won Red Sox a World Series when I was a big fan of them growing up, so that was cool. But we'll see. I mean, there's some motivation certainly on the Detroit side as well. Players playing for contracts, also young players trying to establish themselves. I think I lean most to the underdog at home here, though I think I need even money to get on Detroit. Another one of these battles that doesn't really have a lot to play for, so kind of hard to judge motivation and really want to see what a lineup looks like. Next, go to Boston visiting Baltimore, Nick Pivetta at John Means. This is a pretty good spot for the Red Sox, who are out of contention, 7 games under 500 now, going to finish last in the AL East. Their GM got relieved of his duties a while ago, Chaim Bloom. But ultimately, Nick Pivetta is starting today, visiting John Means. Good park for Means in Baltimore with that left-handed pitcher that doesn't really get a ton of swing and miss, which should really help with that long distance fly ball it would take to get out of left field. On the other side, Pivetta's the opposite with a lot of swing and miss. Can get a little bit wild from time to time, can get hit hard if he's not missing bats, but ultimately that's the side I want here. And the problem for me is Baltimore celebrating their AL East championship kind of out of nowhere coming into the year. We got numbers been crashing down. Currently Means only a -107 favorite at home, over under 7.5, which has fallen from 8. So we'll probably see a lot of absentees from the Baltimore lineup, to say the least. I'm very interested in Boston at -103, but I think I, at a minimum, want even money here because they haven't really been playing for much for a long time. I've gone with the youth movement, playing a lot of younger players, and that's not a great setup against one of the best teams in baseball, with a 100-win Baltimore Orioles, who have clinched the AL East. Next, we'll go to Tampa Bay visiting Toronto. Questions here about what Tampa's playing for, as they've clinched the 1 seed or the first seed in the wild card, the top wild card position. Meanwhile, the Jays are fighting like heck to try to get in the wild card. They're currently 1 game ahead of Houston, 2 games ahead, or excuse me, they're 1 game ahead of Houston. Yeah, 2 games ahead of Seattle. That's really the fight right now between Toronto, Houston, and Seattle, and then assuming that Texas holds on to win the AL West. Got Aaron Savali starting for Tampa, who's probably pitching just to stay in it as long as possible and put up a decent outing to keep his spot in the playoff rotation, though ultimately Tampa, who knows what they're going to do with it, though they've lost a lot of starters, so we'll see what happens there. Toronto with Kikuchi starting should have a much longer leash, but also should see aggressive bullpen use. Toronto didn't use Eric Swanson the last couple days and have a deep bullpen as well. So when you look at this number, it feels big to me with Kikuchi -138 favorite at home, over under is 8, juice to the under. But it's really hard to evaluate what Tampa's doing here. And even if they start a good lineup, you might see Savali pulled fairly early, like a 4-inning type of start, like we saw from Zach Wheeler last night, or potentially their stud hitters like Rosarena only playing 6 innings, and then your price looks a lot worse, especially if a close game late. Of course, they blow out Kikuchi early. Could be great for backing Tampa that are probably overpriced here. But my dilemma is that it's hard to know what that's going to look like. And I think Kikuchi could pitch fairly well as he's got a great arm. Next, go to New York and the Yankees visiting. I guess we'll go to Kansas City. New York is visiting the Royals. We got Carlos Rodon starting at Jordan Lyles. Currently Rodon a minus 146 favorite. Over under is 9.5, juiced a little bit to the under. Lyles has been awful all year. Probably should never be a starter in the major leagues again, but he's got through the year healthy, eaten a lot of innings for Kansas City, so maybe that's a win for them. I'm not backing the home dog, I got to say. So I'm going to move on to Oakland visiting Los Angeles, the Angels. Neither of these two teams have much to play for. Waldichuk visiting Chase Silseth, coming off concussion IL, which took a long time for him to come back. So I kind of lean the other way with Oakland, a plus 130 underdog right now. Over under is 8.5, juiced to the under. It's hard to back Oakland, I gotta say, but I think that's my probably biggest interest in this one. Fading a guy off the concussion IL who really struggled to come back from an injury like that. Not something you really see from pitchers too often. Freak accident when he got hit in the back of the head with a throw, I think from first base going to third base, just didn't duck down or didn't get down in time. Last but not least, we'll go to a big matchup in Texas visiting Seattle. Nathan Eovaldi at Brian Wu. I went to this series last weekend here in the Dallas area in Arlington. And then we saw last night Aroldis Chapman come in after Texas was controlling Seattle the whole game, blew a save, lost the game, and kind of put the division back in. I mean, a win there, and Texas, I don't think, could have been caught by Seattle, so because they are 3 games up. So I would have put them 5 games up if it would have swung the other way. Now it's not over yet. They're still fighting. The Astros are 2 games back. So really, I think Texas, they probably lose the tiebreaker with Houston, if I'm remembering correctly. So then you probably need at least 1 win and Houston not to sweep to get through with this. Seattle, I guess, could catch them if they sweep the last 3 games, but the way that they've been playing seems really unlikely. The nice part for Seattle is Nathan Eovaldi starting for Texas, who's not been healthy for a long time, should get hit pretty hard. Problem for Seattle is Brian Wu is starting for them, and he has gotten torched against Texas so far this season, and really in his debut season, his whole career. Over under we'll start with the side. Brian Wu minus 112 favorite at home. Over under is 8, slightly juiced to under. Climbed from 7.5 earlier. And that's still a low total for me. I mean, yes, Seattle, the ball doesn't fly very far. Yes, these are 2 pitching staffs that are going to be very focused on limiting runs, try to keep this for the Rangers to win the division, for Seattle to stay in the playoff hunt. Should see a very aggressive management type of structure, especially with these 2 starters, that as soon as they start leaking oil, you could probably expect a substitution or getting yanked with someone coming in from the bullpen. The problem for the Rangers, that doesn't look very good right now. Their bullpen's been bad all season. They've had some more stability late in games, but they've still almost choked up a bunch of games. They did all 3 games of the series last weekend in Texas. I'd like to back Brian Wu here, but I don't like him as odds-on favorite right now. Even at home, certainly I think Seattle's more likely to win this one, especially with the struggles of Nathan Eovaldi. But I think there's going to be a lot of runs here, so I like over 8 in that one. And last but not least, I guess we get to interleague. We got a few games here. San Diego visiting Chicago, the White Sox. We got Nick Martinez at Dylan Cease, who's had a very up and down season after a great year last year. Currently Martinez and the Padres a minus 137 favorite. Over under is 8.5, juiced slightly to the over. I'm not in a position to want to back the White Sox here. They've been a bad team for years, despite high expectations. I don't see how Nick Martinez is this sizable of a favorite, though, on the road in a meaningless game. Minnesota then visits Colorado. Currently, Joe Ryan on the road at Ty Block. Probably one of those starts. He's not going to go very deep. The Twins are 4 games behind Texas with 3 games to play, so that doesn't matter. They got nothing to play for. Currently, Ryan a minus 184 favorite on the road. Over is 11.5, juice slightly to the under. I would expect over, but worried about what Minnesota is going to put out there. I imagine Colorado will put the best they got. So I guess I lean to the Colorado side as well, plus 168 currently at BetOnline, and that over 11.5. And last but not least, a game that does matter, Houston visiting Arizona. We got Houston in the last wildcard spot, 1 game ahead of Seattle, so a loss, and they could see themselves in the other direction. Arizona are 1.5 up on the NL wild card on that last position. So 2 games up on Chicago, which is big for them to fall out, and 3 games up on Cincinnati. So they'd have to lose them all. Cincinnati would have to win them all, and then still lose the tiebreaker for that to not get Arizona in the playoffs. So really, they're fighting against Miami and the Cubs, and probably one win would be potentially good enough for Arizona. But JP France visits Zach Gallen, who's been so good at home this year, certainly surviving on some very heavy contact and powerful high swing, I guess, high hard hit rates. But it's worked for him this season. Gallen, a -117 favorite at home, over unders 9.5, juiced to the under. We've seen the total tick up a little bit here, expecting some runs. JP France is really hard to trust, in my humble opinion. Not in a great park either for a new pitcher. Probably has never pitched there in his career, as he's very young. Zach Gallen certainly will know the ropes there, but I have big concerns about the Arizona bullpen. I feel like I'm looking for Arizona to drop here price-wise, and if that happens, I'll look at them a little bit more closely. But ultimately, Houston's a much better team, and they're an underdog on the road at Arizona just because of this great starting pitcher. But I got really serious concerns about Arizona and their bullpen, and we'll be looking to be against them as much as possible in the wild card. So I guess I lean to Arizona on that one, but I think I need a better price and maybe even close to even money, which I doubt I'll get. And I'm not likely to play an over 9.5 with Zach Gallen on the mound, though I think there could be some runs in that one as well. So thanks for tuning in. If you're on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please leave a 5-star review and I will read it as soon as I see it. We do have a best bet coming, so stick around. And then if you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. That'd be huge to get me and really just try to get up the search ranking as much as possible, because the more clicks, the more watches, more viewers and things of that nature, the better I can spend more. I can certainly look at myself in the mirror and say, wow, I'm spending a lot of time doing this and I should keep doing that, or adding to it is really my ideal. If you're not on Patreon yet, checking me out, patreon.com/real_G Warner, especially if you subscribe on other platforms. I'm sure the cost will be better for you. So check that out. Get direct access to me. You can ask me questions throughout the day. We're going over the potential teaser opportunities with the Packers and the Lions yesterday, with all the injury reports and the injury snafus. Bad reporting came out yesterday. So that was, I think, good and probably is worth the value there. But check me out, patreon.com/real_G Warner. So now it's time for the ultimate best bet. And I guess I probably should put one out there. For this episode of Betting the Pitch, MLB edition with the real_G Warner, my best bet for Friday, September 29th, Major League Baseball. I'm going to go with Oakland and Ken Waldichuk, a +130 underdog on the road. Over under is 8.5 on this one. So not expecting a ton of runs in Anaheim, but my biggest question is about Chase Silseth coming off the IL. A weird injury, as freak accident, concussion, and it took a long time for this Angels starter to even get back here. He's been on the IL. Expected to return for a long time now, and it just hasn't happened. Oakland has been feisty this year, certainly not a good team, but the Angels have been nowhere near expectations. Their lineup is absolutely nowhere near it was expected to be, with Trout and Ohtani on the IL. So take Oakland +130 with a good swing and miss pitcher that should have the ability to keep a quieter than expected Angels lineup. Keep it quiet for tonight. And that'll do it for this episode of Betting the Pitch with the real_G Warner. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be doing this is a baseball pod. I'll be doing a soccer pod later today to get you ready for the weekend. And let's make some money. Let's get ready. Let's keep what we've earned so far as we get ready for the playoffs. Major League Baseball playoffs will be great. Looking forward to that. Thanks again for tuning in and all the support. If you could tell your friends, it'd be huge. And I will talk to you all very, very soon, just in a couple hours, actually.